Lopes fans, welcome in. My name is Brennan Williams, and this is Go Lopes Radio. Really exciting episode for you guys to listen to today. We sat down with Andrew from the Runnin Hoops podcast. We talked about GCU's first game in the Acrisure Classic this Tuesday, taking on the Utah Utes. Now, listen, it's Feast Week. There's a lot going on. Probably travel. Guys, this is a really big week for GCU basketball. 2 games against Power 4 teams, opportunity to bounce back, build their resume. So make sure you tune in. Games will be a little later if you're here in Arizona. I mean, they'll be late on Pacific time as well. But make sure you tune into that. The games are on CBS Sports Network. But guys, our conversation with Andrew was great. We talked about the history of the Utah program, providing some context, kind of how we got here. The new coach who played there was a really good player for Utah, and some of the players that they've got in the matchups with some of the GCU guys. So it's going to be a really fascinating game, guys. I know Utah has slipped a little bit, but they've got some guys. They've got a player who can really, really fill it up. So should make for a very interesting game on Tuesday. We really appreciate Andrew and his time hopping on the pod and telling us all about Utah basketball. So thank you to that. Guys, Northwestern State, not a ton to recap from it, guys. Kind of a sleepy game. Refs obviously made it super choppy with the 50 fouls. I think the message, I guess, my takeaway from the game is just these are really important opportunities. I know that it's Northwestern State. They're not good. They're 300 plus in Ken Palm. Guys, they hung around a little bit, whatever. I think they cut it to 5 in the second half there. But for this GCU team, these games are really important for them to just get more opportunities to play together, learn how to play together, what it takes to win. Scouting and, then executing on that scout. Like, this stuff really matters. And I know it kind of sounds like media speak, but patience with this group, and they're continuing to develop to, hopefully still meet some of the goals that they had this season. So I still think it's possible. And then this week, right ahead of them, right, Acrisure, you get 2 Power 4 opponents. We'll see if that's going to be Iowa or Ole Miss on Wednesday. But 2 really good opportunities to build the resume. So we're really excited for that, guys. Not a ton else to take away from that Northwestern State game. But really excited for this week, guys. And really appreciate Andrew hopping on the pod, like I said, and telling us all about Utah hoops. So make sure you guys, please like, subscribe, wherever you listen. It really means a lot to us over here at Go Lopes Radio. And we really appreciate it. So let's head over to that conversation with Andrew from the Runnin Hoops podcast. Hi, guys. I'm excited to be joined by Andrew from the Runnin Hoops podcast. He covers everything Utah Utes hoops. Andrew, how are we doing this morning?
Doing great. Looking forward to the conversation. And I think this is going to be the first ever meeting between the Lopes and the Runnin Utes.
I think so. I think in some of the other sports, I think they played, I'm trying to think, I think maybe baseball, but I know I've seen GCU play Utah. Maybe women's basketball, I actually think, has played Utah already. So this will be great. So I think first, Andrew, can you tell us kind of where we can find you? Tell us about your podcast. Just, where can we find you and listen to you?
Yeah, so I launched this endeavor about 5 years ago, right when they hired Craig Smith, when they fired Larry Kraskowiak, trying to organically help drive interest in Utah basketball. It had been, it has been at times one of the premier programs in the western part of the United States. Hasn't been that for, a minute. And so, the fan interest had dropped quite a bit. And so I figured I'd take the opportunity to, start something with a new coach and a new team. And so I've been doing it for about 5 years now. This is my 5th year. And, it scratches an itch, right?
Yep.
That sports talk itch that I think a lot of guys have and a lot of fans have.
I love it. Yeah.
And so you can find me wherever you get a podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and then at Runnin Hoops Pod over on X, where, sometimes the in-game tweets can be a bit of an emotional roller coaster for all of us.
The other night, case 1, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But then we try to come back to earth, and, it's one of those things where it's fun too. And so my podcast, I incorporate a lot of, movie references and clips and other things like that to just kind of lighten the mood. when we have those epitome of brutality games, if
Yep.
you will.
Oof.
So
Yeah. It's a brutal sport. It's a brutal sport this year too. Without a doubt. People are there's upsets everywhere. So we're going to talk a little bit about GCU taking on Utah first day in the Acrisure Classic over in Palm Springs. Before we get there, I want to kind of look in the rearview mirror a little bit. You mentioned, you've been doing the pod for 5 years. Let's give GCU fans a little bit of an understanding about Utah basketball. Take us as far back as you feel maybe we need to know, maybe early 2000s, because I know they've had, a lot of great players, some really good teams. And then we're going to eventually get to maybe the more recent history and just maybe maybe struggle's the word, but take us back, as far back as you think we need to know that's relevant for where we're at today with Utah basketball.
well, yeah. So I mean, Utah basketball historically is one of the winningest programs in college basketball. I think despite all of the recent struggles, they're still in the top 20 in all-time wins. Rick Majerus is probably the name that most college basketball fans are going to be familiar with.
Yep, we just played St. Louis as well.
Yeah,
So,
there you go.
yeah.
So he ushered us through kind of the heyday of Runnin Hoops basketball, took him to 11 NCAA tournaments in his 15 years there, and took him to the Final Four in 1998 in the national championship. They had a lead against Kentucky at halftime and then just kind of ran out of gas in that game. And so, it's been 20 years since he was the head coach at Utah, and that recent history has been a little bit more of a struggle. It's had some ups with, guys like Kyle Kuzma and Jakob Pertl and DeLon Wright, Brandon Carlson more recently, but it's had a lot of downs. And so, 4 years ago, we hired Craig Smith coming from Utah State, very successful coach at the mid-major level, just never quite got it together at Utah, whether it was recruiting or in-game, game results and what have you. And so now we've got a new coach, Alex Jensen, who played on that 98 Final Four team, was kind of the glue guy on that team. And so it's a bit of a new old era for Utah basketball in a lot of ways, and it's reinvigorated the fan base. And so, a lot of folks are optimistic in Salt Lake that eventually this thing's going to get turned around. And I think it's very difficult to ever be Rick Majerus, right?
Yeah.
But to get it to that heights again. But I think there's, as they say, the standard is the standard. And so hopefully, we can get back to at least being an NCAA tournament regular.
Yeah, you bring up Alex Jensen. Let's go there right now. Obviously, we find this happening right now in this kind of weird space, right? Money and mixing money with past emotions and past players, all this. And you've seen mistakes made, right, with some of those hires. Obviously, this one seems to have a completely different feel, right? Alex Jensen, former player, comes in. He has a ton of NBA experience, very similar to Kevin Young over at BYU. We don't have to talk about that. We don't know where the lines are there, but kind of a similar model, right? A ton of NBA experience, a ton of basketball experience, probably really good connections, I'd imagine. Obviously, I would imagine he's very well connected in Utah as well. So he brings a lot to the table outside of maybe X's and O's as well. So can you talk about, you say kind of this reinvigoration of Utah basketball. Can you talk about the idea of the reinvigoration mixed in with, at the end of the day in college sports, it's really hard year one. Yeah, you can bring guys in, you can pay the money, but that tension, it seems like you guys are in this season and at this moment right now where you're really excited for the future, but listen, there might be some speed bumps here in year one.
Yeah, for sure. So, Alex, of course, well thought of in NBA circles, and also well thought of, again, among Utah fans. And really he was one of one this offseason in terms of booster support, alumni support, former players support, right? Like he was really the only choice. And I think that's where, there is this take in the broader college basketball world of, they're just copying what BYU did with Kevin Young. Alex was the only person that was going to get the level of support that's needed in 2025 to run a college basketball program. And I think
Got
that
it.
that's just kind of the bottom line. And so he does obviously remind people of the good old days of Utah basketball, and that's what people want to get back to. And he's really the only person that the boosters, the alumni, the former players trust with actually getting this done. To your point, it's an entirely new roster. They brought back 10% of their scoring from last year with Keanu Dawes, and so yeah, there are some bumps to be expected along the way, and so it's one of those things where it's tough, I think, for fans to jump all the way in with 2 feet, because the product is not necessarily going to be
Sure.
super great like right off the bat, but it's also really important for people to jump in with both feet right off the bat so that they can really start to build that home court advantage again and show recruits and portal guys in the coming years that this is a place where you can come and win at a high level and then go to the next level.
Yeah, yeah, a little chicken and the egg situation, right? Like, what comes first? You gotta invest, but the support, that all, it does work together. So we'll see
Yeah.
how that pieces together. This takes me to my last question with kind of our framing of Utah basketball. I know the Ringer, Bill Simmons Network did a really good kind of mini film on basketball in Utah, the significant investment that's happened over really, I mean, it's been for a bit, but especially maybe the last like 10 years or so. We know from a high school level that it's been, no secret. The is it Utah Prep down south in southern Utah that they kind of built a little bit of a basketball factory. Obviously, BYU's made significant investments. Utah State, even GCU, obviously in the conference with Utah State this year, they've got a great team, great program. So, where does Utah, I don't not necessarily fit in, but do you feel that overall investment is that kind of like affecting everybody? And is there an opportunity, I think, more in the coming years for Utah to see that investment? And are those people there, and is that support there?
I think it is. I think it is. Obviously, Utah plays in the John M. Huntsman Center, and though John has passed a few years ago, his family is still very involved with
Okay.
helping to finance Utah basketball. There's a lot of investment on the football side as well, and so Utah is one of those programs where there's got to be a balance, right, with the football investment and the basketball investment. And with the expanded college football playoff, there's even more emphasis on making sure that you get enough players to be really hyper
Yeah.
competitive in football. And so I think for basketball, it's going to be more of they got to prove the concept a little bit more. But I certainly think that there will be money available to the program with Alex at the helm, as long as they start to show results at some point.
Sure.
And so they're never going to have as much as, say, a BYU, and it's going to take a while for them to get back to, say, the home court advantage of like a Utah State. Utah State's got a lot of really organic growth that they've done over the last
Yep.
20 or so years, and their arena there is a house of horrors for a lot of teams. You guys are going to find that out this year when
Yeah. Oh,
you go
yeah.
up to the Spectrum.
Yeah. We've
I
seen
mean,
the
we haven't
videos.
played them. We haven't played them up there in years, and
Yeah.
so and so Utah's kind of right now they're climbing, right, in terms of support, in terms of money. But I think that it's there if they can show that they've got the juice back.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, now listen, let's just get right into it now. Obviously, GCU, as we mentioned, taking on the Utah Utes on Tuesday, the 25th. Do I have my dates right? Yes, the 25th
Yeah,
in Palm Springs as part of the Acrisure. Make sure if you guys don't, maybe aren't familiar with all the details on that, just do a little bit of research because there's 3 or 4 different pods within the Acrisure Classic. So just make sure you've got the right one. It is a late tip, so everyone be ready for that. I believe it's on CBS Sports Network. But, I think both teams come in at really interesting points right now for this game. GCU, sure, they're 3-2, and their 3 wins are against teams that are, all about 250 plus Ken Palm. Nothing to note of there. And then, the 2 games they've had against, quality opponents, they have both lost, not looked good, frustrated coach Bryce Drew. But let's talk about where Utah comes in right now, because, they start out 5-0, and, I believe I read, or you said they hadn't covered on Ken Palm, I believe, in 1 game. The analytics crew wasn't crazy so far about Utah, so they had dropped a little bit. And then Cal Poly happened. So they're going to come in off a loss. Can you talk about the first 5 games, a little bit of maybe what you saw, what you liked, and then, kind of what happened and where this team's coming into this game against GCU at this moment?
Yeah, so I mean, very similar in terms of the wins, right? I mean, you're not talking about super quality competition. Their second game of the season was against Weber State, who took it to them, and somehow Utah managed to get that thing to overtime and win that game. And so they got to 5-0. Had a tough one against Sam Houston, which is probably the best team that they've played this season so far. Outlasted those guys, but again, it was the games that Utah has played this season have all taken on a little bit of a similar path, which is Utah kind of jumps out to a lead and then they can't close it out, right? And that's why they started at 74 in Ken Palm, and I think before the Cal Poly loss they had fallen to like 102 despite being 5-0. And now they're like 120.
And those are all at home, correct? The first 5, right? So you weren't you're not having to leave the state or even leave campus for your first 5 games against those teams. So sorry, take us to the loss though, because you're kind of building up to that. Kind of what happened?
Yeah, I mean, well, so just a little bit before that, the backcourt duo of Terrence Brown and Don McHenry have really showed out for Utah in these first 6 games. And so that's where a lot of the positivity comes in for Utah is this, Terrence Brown, he's kind of a walking bucket type player. And then Keanu Dawes, their lone returner from last year, he's a double-double machine. And so, while there had been some struggles, they still managed to get some wins. The Cal Poly game, was a short turnaround. They had this kid named Ahmed Musa, I think is his name, or Hamid Musa. He's kind of a 6'8" guard, and they just really struggled with his size and Cal Poly's shot making ability.
They didn't defend 4 from 3 against you guys. Yeah.
They didn't defend the 3 at all, and they were kind of playing uphill the entire game. Got it to 3, got it to 2, but couldn't string together back to back like really good offensive possessions. And Cal Poly they just run, everything they do fast. They were playing with a ton of confidence, and Utah just dug themselves way too big a hole in the first half. I think they were down by 11 or 12 at the break, and got it down to, got down by 15 at one point, and they just didn't have the horses to get it done.
Yeah, those games are tough. It sounds eerily similar to the game GCU had with Youngstown State. You're watching it and you're saying, okay, as time goes on, eventually, right, like GCU is going to snap out of it, right? Like of course they're not going to lose this game. They're going to, play better. They're going to get those stops. And I think we've seen a lot of those college basketball games, right? You think of what Troy has done the last few days, USC and San Diego State. They win the San Diego State game, lose the USC game. These games are really interesting where these teams hang around and you're like, oh yeah, the better team is gonna, and that's where we're at with college basketball. Like you give these teams confidence, and then when they play a specific way, that's what caught GCU off guard with Youngstown State. You're mentioning Cal Poly, just like, we're going to just push the pedal down and see where this goes. The more you can provide these unique matchups, if you're one of those teams, like you have a way better shot to win, right? Catching teams off guard. So, we lived through that as well with the Youngstown State loss. Now GCU, again, they've answered back a little bit here, and I think this is a really big 2 games for the Lopes as well. But Let's learn a little bit about the Utah Utes team. You mentioned Terrence Brown, walking bucket. I had him averaging 20 a game, but that went up because he had 29 against Cal Poly. So again, maybe not some awful teams there. So we're not talking the bottom 10 to 50 teams in college basketball. He's been able to score the ball. So tell us about his game and what just allows him to score so effortlessly and efficiently.
Yeah, he gets to the hoop like certainly nobody that Utah has had in recent memory. You'd probably have to go back to like a DeLon Wright
Yeah.
to find a comp in terms of a guy that can score. And he had a game where I think he had 36 against, I want to say, Sam Houston. The games all blend together at this time of
Yeah.
year. Where he had all of his points were in the paint or at the free throw line. Like he started the year 1 of 15 from deep. And so he just has this ability to turn that corner and get to the hoop. He goes right a lot, right? That's his move. And so even against Cal Poly, they forced him to go left. And if you watch the highlights or if you watch the game, like he goes left and then kind of flips it back up, with his right hand. And so he's just one of these guys that he can turn that corner at just about any time. He's got endless amounts of energy, and his 3-point shot is now finally starting to roll into form.
That's what I was going to say. 49% from the field so far this year, which you're like, yeah, that's great, especially for a 6'3" guard, right?
Yeah.
And especially on that volume. But 49%, when you keep in mind that he's only made 29% of his threes, that means he is really, really comfortable getting to his spots, especially getting to the rim. And I mean, to shoot 49% when you're 29% from three as a 6'3" guard, that feels like someone who's maybe it's not just a fluke, right? Maybe catching hot a few games. And he's been pretty consistent. So yeah, I mean, talk about it sounds like his slashing ability, has that led to him getting others involved and other guys, open shots? Or is it more of a, hey, I'm gonna dribble the air out of this basketball and I'm gonna get my 2 points?
I think it's a little bit more of the first thing. There's definitely a drive and kick element to what Utah does, and they've got some decent 3-point shooters. A kid named Jacob Patrick that's just basically a guy that can live in the corner if you want him to, right? But I think for Terrence it's more of just, hey, we need a bucket, right? Go get us a bucket kind of thing. Stop a run or whatever. But when he builds that momentum, that's when I think he gets a little bit enamored with the three. And I think you've seen that with him and with kind of this Utah team this year where they build the lead and then they're like, okay, we've got this double-digit lead. It's time to start bombing threes. And, it just hasn't worked out for him, super well. Like I said, he's starting to round into form on that, getting more assisted threes versus, pull-ups.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he just, they work the screen for him up at the top of the key. And if he can get around that corner, it's usually an easy 2, or he gets to the free throw line.
Yeah, I think that would be a really interesting thing to monitor for Lopes fans. You look at Youngstown, you look at St. Louis, 2 games Bryce talked about, they prepared quite a bit. And what the product that was on the floor, they did not seem ready. Youngstown was running, shooting a ton of threes. GCU wasn't ready for it. St. Louis, obviously an incredibly gifted offensive team. They've had a ton of success this year. GCU, they had a guy who couldn't shoot threes. They weren't ready for that. He was getting to the rim. They had guys that could shoot threes. They weren't contesting. So GCU's ability to kind of hone in on a scout for maybe individually, potentially the best player they've seen this year. Robbie Avila, probably the best player. But, you talk about a guy who this year is averaging 25 a game, 49%. How can GCU prepare? They've got the bodies, the personnel, I think, but how well can they, stay focused in on him and stay disciplined throughout the whole game? We saw GCU just took on Northwestern State and, they were kind of crawling and lingering around, and all of a sudden it's a 5-point game with 9 minutes left. So how much can they keep the pedal down if they're able to have some success with him and not let Utah back in it? Because it sounds like you give him 5 minutes and he can get you individually right back in the game. So let's tell us about any other guys you think we need to know about personnel wise. You talked about the big returning. As a Utah fan, tell us about the other guys GCU fans should keep their eye on and kind of important matchups.
Yeah, well, the other guy in the backcourt is Don McHenry. He's a fifth-year guy that came in from Western Kentucky. I think he was first team All Conference USA. He's not as dynamic necessarily as Terrence Brown, but he's also a guy that can get you a bucket. He's a little bit better from three, and he's got kind of this long scoop shot. I can't even describe it, but it's kind of this like gets to the rim and just has this ability to not get it blocked, I guess would be the easiest way to say it. He's also got some quick hands. And so he's a guy that would have to step up if GCU tried to take away Terrence Brown.
And Andrew, how about this for you? How about this for Don McHenry? Last year, played at GCU. Ready for this stat line? How about 9 for 16 from the field, 3 for 6 from three, 2 for 3 from the line, 5 boards, and 23 points. And GCU needed a buzzer beater. They came back and I believe scored 10 of the last 12 points, included a buzzer beater layup. So he almost, he had a ton of success in GCU Arena, obviously the game on a neutral site, but he's seen GCU and he's pretty familiar. So 23 points last season against GCU.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's good to know, right? See those purple uniforms and say, hey, okay, I got some muscle memory here, right?
Yep.
And then in their front court, it's Keanu Dawes was the guy that the coaching staff looked at on last year's roster and prioritized bringing back. And he's a 6'8" big. He's a 4, but can play the stretch 5. They actually had another guy from Western Kentucky, Babacar Faye, that they brought in, but they lost him to an injury.
Yeah. Preseason, right? Yeah, real killer. He would have been a key piece. We were monitoring that. Yeah.
For sure. Like he was going to be their rim protector, their starting 5. And so they've had to kind of move Dawes into that stretch 5 role at times. But he's one of these guys that, you look up halfway through the first half and he's already got, 8 rebounds or something like that. He needs to develop a little bit more of a mean streak, I think, and just be a little bit more aggressive. I'm interested to see the matchup between him and your starting 4, whose name escapes me because it's hard to pronounce.
Yep, Nana Lusuanane. They are going to be –
that's the guy.
It's going to be 2 Rams all game long. Nana is an absolute workhorse. That'll be a great matchup to watch.
Yeah, so I think, those are kind of the 3 key guys. And then Seydou Traore, who's a guy they got in from Iowa, he's a feast or famine type guy, right? He had 23 in the opener against, who'd they play in the opener? Whoever they played in the opener. Oh, San Jose State. This is great.
Yep,
great
in the Mountain West. Yep, in the Mountain West.
Yeah,
so GCU
I sound like an old guy. Talking about, now he was married to so-and-so.
So much basketball to follow, I know.
But he had 23 against San Jose State, and then he had 0 against Weber State. And so, he's one of these guys that looks the part, but is very feast or famine.
As I say, 2 steals a game, so definitely a guy who can kind of flip a game on that side of the court as well. Terrence Brown, also 2 steals a game, so 2 guys who are pretty active. It seems like. So, okay, let's get into this. We're going to round out the podcast. I would imagine, we haven't seen any spreads yet, but, probably due to Utah's, recent kind of fall in the rankings, I'd imagine GCU maybe 1.5, 2.5 to be favored here. We'll see how that comes out, but I guess you'd maybe call, it wouldn't be an upset, I don't think. I think it'd be a pretty close matchup regardless. For Utah to win the game against GCU, they have to do what?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds super simple, right? But defend and rebound. Their last 2 games, they've had a noticeable size advantage and, frankly, talent advantage inside. against Cal Poly and against Purdue Fort Wayne, and they didn't out rebound either one of them. In fact, they were
Yeah.
minus 10 against Cal Poly, which is just kind of completely unacceptable for a Power 5 team in a game like that. So I think rebounding is really going to be a key, and Grand Canyon certainly has way more size than anybody that Utah has faced this season. And so they're just
even at the guard position as well. GCU brings in the
right.
size, which is kind of unique, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so they've got to prioritize rebounding in this game. And then, the transition defense, the 3-point defense, I mean, they've got to be locked in on all levels. One of the things I've said on my show, or I'm going to, I haven't recorded it yet, but coming out of this Cal Poly game is that if Alex Jensen needed to get his team's attention about certain things that he's been trying to get him to do, like defend and rebound, this loss should give him that opportunity.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think for Utah to, I agree with you. I think they're going to be a short underdog. But for them to get the win or even stay in the game, they're going to have to prioritize defense and rebounding.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll be an interesting storyline to watch. GCU with a ton of size. They've, Bryce has talked about their toughness and questioned it at times, various moments. So I find this game just fascinating. Where it comes out in the schedule, I think, for both teams. And it's just a really, really big and important game to see, kind of fork in the road moment, I think, maybe for both teams early here in the non-con. But very last thing here. Let's hear your pick for the game. Here at Go Lopes Radio, we try to do this. And, I always unbiasedly pick the games, give my honest opinion, what I think. So, Andrew, tell us what you think is going to happen on Tuesday when the Lopes play the Utes.
Yeah, well, I think the good news for both teams is that regardless of the outcome of this game, you get a quad one opportunity in the next game.
Yeah.
Right? Which you don't always get in some of these MTEs, right? Like you drop into that losers bracket,
yeah.
and it's, it's way worse. So I'll just say that. Like, I think that for both teams, you've got a great opportunity in the very next game. I would lean Grand Canyon in this game. I would. I think that, like I said, the four man really concerns me. The fact that they've got a big guard in Henley, I think is his name.
Yeah, Jaden Henley.
6'7", kind of the same makeup that they just struggled with Cal Poly. So I would be a Grand Canyon lean in this one, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me if Utah, bounced back and, was able to get the win. There's certainly talent on this team. It's just a matter in this transfer portal era, right, of how quickly can you get it to come together. And we've seen that throughout college basketball already, right? A Texas Tech looks really good in their opener at Baha Mar, and then Purdue runs them right off the floor.
20-0 run. Yeah.
20-0
run.
So,
yeah.
So who knows, right? But certainly this is as toss-up of a game as it gets.
Yeah, should be a really, really good one. Again, guys, GCU taking on the Utah Utes this Tuesday, 10 p.m. Mountain Time. If you're a I guess in or going to be attending the game, that'd be 9 p.m. Local there in Palm Springs on CBS Sports Network. Make sure you watch it. Andrew, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And man, best of luck Tuesday and the rest of the season. And one more time, can you just tell us where we can find you and where we can listen to you?
Yeah, at Runnin Hoops Pod over on X, and Runnin Hoops Podcast, where you get a podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those wonderful places. I appreciate you having me on. And I love talking college hoops, right? So my show gets into really all of the Big 12, not just Utah. Obviously, we're Utah-centric, but, we'll do a whip around and talk about the other teams as well.
I was going to say, and really quick here, can you plug, I listened, you have a Big 12 full preview that people can find. Can you tell us where they can find that if we have some people who love Big 12 hoops?
Yeah, so I ventured into the world of writing a PDF this year, and so I put together like 100-page Big 12 preview that kind of looks at all of the rosters, the burning questions for each team, hot seat, stuff like that. I've got that available. If you Venmo me at Runnin Hoops, it's $3, and I'll share the PDF with you. Send me your email address, and I'll share the PDF with you. It's a great way to kind of get caught up on college hoops when this is a tough time of year for people to do that because there's so much going on with football. Yep. So thank you for mentioning that.
Of course. Yeah. Thanks again, Andrew. And cheers.